The sky over Jakarta flickered green that morning. It wasn't dawn and it wasn't lightning. Every camera turned upward. Birds scattered as if the air had split. Seconds later, the signal flooded to the satellites, drowning communications in a pulse that sounded like silence wrapped in static. Phones buzzed, drones dropped mid-flight, and every global positioning system blinked out at once. At the United Earth Space Monitoring Station on Kilimanjaro, 27-year-old Dr. Lia Chung watched as the monitors went dark, then flickered back to life, this time broadcasting something they hadn't recorded, something that had never come from any satellite they knew, a voice or the imitation of one, warbled through the static, clicking in patterns too structured to be noise, too alien to be comfort. "We have contact," she whispered, forgetting to breathe. Half a world away. Commander Rafael Torres, veteran of 2 orbital wars and captain of the UN Defense Fleet's Aegis program, stood aboard the aging orbital station Daedalus, currently docked near the edge of Earth's shadow. He had been rehearsing his retirement speech, wondering if he would miss the view when Mars went dark. It wasn't dramatic. The feed from the Valles Marineris colony, simply cut, no explosion, no warning, just a loss of light, then data, then the creeping realization that it wasn't a glitch. Back on Earth, panic found its voice. Politicians clung to old habits, blaming one another, spinning the event as cyberterrorism or natural disaster. Conspiracy theorists bloomed like weeds, some claiming it was divine punishment, others swearing it was the Martians themselves. But among the chaos, a few began to piece it together. Lia Chung was one of them. "This isn't a message," she said to her superior, reviewing the waveform of the alien signal. "It's a scan. They're looking at us. Measuring." "Measuring for what?" he asked. She looked out the window toward the dull red dot in the sky. Weakness. The second strike came 2 weeks later. This time it was public. A mining station on Titan, home to 400 workers, was erased in a burst of violet energy that left nothing but a spiraling hole in the moon's crust. The footage, silent and grainy, showed a single flash from above. No ship, no warning, just annihilation. Earth stopped pretending. Emergency councils formed in every major capital. Alliances flickered back to life. NATO, the Eastern Coalition, the African Unity Compact. But they were symbols, not solutions. Old rivalries flared. China accused the West of triggering a cosmic adversary through deep space probes. The U.S. blamed quantum research in Berlin. Russia closed its ports and blacked out its networks. But the attacks didn't discriminate. A facility in Mongolia disappeared next, then a floating city in the Pacific. Each strike was surgical, precise, and ruthlessly random. And after each one, the same signal returned, stronger now, clearer, a rhythm of clicking sounds punctuated by long, empty pauses, as if it were listening for a response, as if it expected humanity to speak back. Lia Chung didn't sleep. Her apartment in Nairobi's tech district filled with coffee cups and overlapping data streams. She tracked patterns, tried to decode intention. There was no clear language, but a kind of logic emerged, mathematics wrapped in motion, time measured in pulses. Not a greeting, a statement. "We are here." She uploaded her findings to the Open Science Network, not trusting any government to act on them alone. That's where General Sophia Mbeki found her. Mbeki, commander of the Pan-African Defense Grid, had fought off pirates in orbit and warlords on Earth. She wasn't impressed by credentials, but Leah's work forced her to reconsider. "They're not invading," Lia told her. "They're probing, cataloging. We're insects to them, General. And the reason they haven't spoken to us in words is because they don't think we understand speech. They see no intelligence here worth negotiating with." Mbeki stared at the projection of Earth's orbital grid, now lit with 28 confirmed attack vectors. "Then we need to prove them wrong." Across the ocean, Commander Torres was pulled out of retirement. The Daedalus station was reactivated, patched with hybrid propulsion stolen from canceled lunar programs. Torres didn't ask questions. He called in every favor, every pilot he trusted, and they launched the first coordinated defense net. Umbral 1, along Earth's L2 point. They knew it was a bluff, but it was the only card they had. The first ship appeared not long after. It didn't look like anything imagined. No wings, no hull, just an absence. A void that reflected no light and cast no shadow. It hovered at the edge of detection, as if curious. And when Umbra 1 fired warning pulses, it responded with silence. Then a sudden, tearing scream across all frequencies that knocked out every drone within 800 miles. But the net held. It was a failure, technically, but it was also the first time humanity had resisted. The alien ship withdrew, vanishing between quantum frames like a ghost refusing to be caught on camera. The next day, a voice broadcast across all global channels. Not the alien voice, a human one, a child's. The boy's name was Khalid Al-Masri, 9 years old. His mother had been a technician on the Titan outpost, killed in the first wave. He had taken her tablet, somehow uploaded a message to the public frequency archive, and in his shaky voice he asked a question no one else dared speak. Why do they think we're nothing? Why won't we be one family now? The message spread like fire, replayed, shared, parroted, but never forgotten. In Tokyo, crowds marched, chanting his name. In Sao Paulo, mothers painted his face on walls. In Cairo, he was quoted in Parliament. And in Geneva, amid protesters and security drones, the United Nations held its first true global emergency summit since the Climate Accords of 2063. They called it the Unity Summit. Lia Chung presented her findings alongside a holographic projection of the attack patterns. Commander Torres stood in full dress uniform, flanked by Mbeki and half the Aegis pilots. They stood not as representatives of nations, but as humans. The message was simple. Division was death. Not everyone agreed, but enough did. On the final night of the summit, after 23 hours of negotiation, Earth signed the Genesis Protocol, an agreement to pool planetary resources, military command, scientific knowledge, and cultural influence. Flags would still exist, but the defense of humanity would now be a shared purpose. Outside the glass panel hall, hundreds of protesters knelt in silence, each holding a candle. The light stretched for blocks. No riots, no speeches, just a quiet defiance. A journalist captured the moment and asked Lia Chung what it meant. She looked into the camera, tired and hoarse, and said, "It means we choose to be one, because the galaxy doesn't care who we were before." Above them, the sky pulsed once more, but Earth no longer stood alone. The Genesis Protocol was signed at midnight in Geneva, but its implications echoed louder than any declaration before it. What had begun as a defense pact swiftly morphed into something larger, something irreversible. Earth, fractured by centuries of conflict, now faced the necessity of becoming a single voice or none at all. Lia Chung stood in the steel silence of the Unity Command Corps, a subterranean complex beneath Nairobi built in record time by drones, bots, and desperate labor. What once was a data center for weather forecasting had been converted into the nerve center of a species-wide resistance. Around her, dozens of analysts, translators, engineers, and diplomats worked under a single flag that hadn't existed a month ago. It wasn't a flag of nations. It was a stylized Earth wrapped in orbiting rings of light. No borders, no names. She had traded in her lab coat for a gray command interface suit, its fabric threaded with smart fibers that displayed dynamic data as she moved. She hadn't asked for authority. She just kept showing up, and in the absence of a chain of command, people started following her lead. General Mbeki, now Supreme Commander of Terran Strategic Forces, operated on a different plane. While Lia computed alien pulses and their resonance frequencies, Mbeki coordinated the planetary defense perimeter, a fragile ring of satellites, particle beam relays, and retooled mining lasers hastily converted into orbital artillery. It was crude, barely tested, and underpowered, but it was the best Earth had ever built. In orbit, Commander Rafael Torres returned to Daedalus Station, now reclassified as TDS Unity. Terran defense ship, though its hull was patched with mismatched plates and jury-rig modules. He walked the halls with the weight of memory, hearing ghost voices from long-past drills, seeing the faces of dead pilots in quiet reflections. His crew was a mosaic of old enemies and new recruits, Koreans, Brazilians, Australians, Nigerians, Martian-born exiles. No one had time to hate each other anymore. There was no room left for small wars. And yet, Unity brought its own complications. The merging of military databases caused tactical delays. Language barriers returned with vengeance under pressure. Even the orientation of maps became an argument. Some units trained with Earth's magnetic north is up. Others used orbital spin. Torres ended the debate with a simple order. Up is the enemy. Everything else is flexible. Back on Earth, the political leaders who had reluctantly authorized the Genesis Protocol were struggling to stay relevant. Sovereignty faded into theater. The World Trade Council was replaced by the Terran Resource Allocation Authority. National currencies were frozen and merged into a credit system tied production, not territory. Old empires were reborn as service networks. Some resisted. Armed enclaves in Siberia and the American Midwest refused to comply, broadcasting libertarian manifestos and threats of civil war. But no missiles were launched. No uprisings gained traction. Because the enemy wasn't coming, it was already here. Surveillance satellites caught glimpses of dark objects lurking just beyond the moon's far side, not attacking, watching. Then came the mutiny. Within Unity Command, a senior engineer leaked classified files revealing that the first contact had occurred 5 years earlier. Not with an attack, but with an anomalous energy field near Neptune. The data had been suppressed by a coalition of corporate interests, fearing economic collapse. The revelation hit like a gut punch. Protests erupted. A mob in Lagos stormed a synthetic food depot. In Paris, digital artists projected the faces of the 5 corporations onto every cathedral wall, branding them traitors. Lia Chung sat through the emergency briefing, her fists clenched as executives offered explanations. None mattered. The damage was done. Trust had cracked. She turned to Mbeki as the meeting ended. Unity won't survive another fracture. Then we reinforce it with purpose, Mbeki said. We remind them what's at stake. So they did. A series of global broadcasts was launched, streamed directly from Unity Command to every inhabited zone on Earth and in orbit. Lia appeared first, not in uniform, but in simple clothing, eyes shadowed by exhaustion, voice steady. We were betrayed by fear, she said. But fear isn't our compass anymore. This is not about nations. It's about existence. The enemy doesn't care what language we speak, what borders we drew. They see us as one thing. So we will become it. The speech went viral. Edited, quoted, twisted. But its core message held. In orbit, Torres initiated Operation Echo, a series of low-risk skirmishes using unmanned vessels to provoke responses from the Watchers beyond the moon. The results were revealing. The enemy vessels did not pursue. They responded only when threatened. Even their hostility had a structure, a patience. Torres sent a message back to Unity Command. They're studying us, just like we're studying them. Lia had come to the same conclusion. The clicks and pulses of the original alien signal were not commands. They were a kind of sonar. The enemy was mapping Earth's response cycles. The louder the fear, the sharper the next strike. She theorized it was a test, a Darwinian algorithm evaluating threats. So they stopped reacting with panic. They restructured the broadcast networks, replacing news of casualties with information on recovery, resistance training, and Unity milestones. It wasn't deception, it was survival. Unity spread not by force, but necessity. Cities previously at odds shared energy. Scarce water was redirected from corporate reserves. India and China jointly launched the Phoenix Array, a solar lattice designed to blind incoming stealth objects. AI systems were linked through neural mesh to optimize global logistics. For the first time in history, Earth had a unified grid. Still, the threat loomed. 2 months after the signing of the Genesis Protocol, the first counteroffensive was launched, a coordinated electromagnetic pulse cascade fired from the moon's dark side, designed to expose the cloaked ships lurking beyond Lagrange Point 2. It worked. 9 vessels were revealed. Massive, geometrically impossible. They shimmered in dimensions that flickered between known physics and nightmare. And when the pulse hit, they moved not forward, not away. They folded, as if reality bent around them. But they did not fire. Instead, a new signal came, this time not in clicks, but in pure, unfiltered thought. A psychic pressure radiated through every quantum relay, through dream and screen and skull. A message not in words, but sensation. You are awakening. Cease. Millions collapsed. Some died. Others wept without knowing why. Torres bled from his eyes. Leah's ears rang for hours. The message had no accent, no voice, but its command was clear. The next day, Earth's first unified countermessage was broadcast. A simple sequence. Prime numbers, then the DNA code for Homo sapiens, followed by a final transmission from Khalid al-Masri, the boy who had become the face of Earth's unity movement. He spoke softly. We don't want war, but we won't be erased. If we must rise together to show you we matter, then we will rise. Torres watched the broadcast from orbit, face lit by the pale glow of 1,000 ship lights. Leah stood in the silent dark of Unity Command, hand pressed against the glass. Becky didn't smile, but she nodded. Somewhere in the void, the watchers remained still. The transmission of Khalid al-Masri's message marked a turning point. Not in the war. There was no war yet, but in the understanding of it. For the first time, Earth had spoken back with a voice that was more than data, more than defense. It had sent a statement of identity. And the enemy had not answered. Days passed, then weeks. No further attacks came. Unity Command began calling it the silence window. Across Earth, life did not return to normal. It couldn't. But it settled into a strange rhythm of preparation and hope. Supply lines stabilized. Orbital manufacturing stations began to produce new alloy plates for the defense grid. Human ingenuity, finally directed outward instead of inward, moved faster than ever. Commander Torres stood at the forward deck of TDS Unity, watching a fleet of Earth-made interceptor drones complete their first synchronized maneuver in Earth's upper orbit. The coordination was imperfect, but it was elegant. His second-in-command, a young strategist from the Singapore Orbital Academy named Imani Fak, approached with the latest telemetry. They're holding formation, she said, offering him a digital slate. Not bad for 6 weeks' training. They're not soldiers, Torres replied. They're survivors trying to become soldiers. That's something different, something better. Assuming they get the chance to fight. He gave a small, hollow chuckle. They'll get it. The question is, will they want it once it starts? Imani hesitated. Do you? He didn't answer. Below, Earth glowed with uncanny calm. For the first time in recorded memory, there was no active war, no civil unrest. Global crime rates had plummeted, not out of morality, but focus. Even the black markets were running humanitarian efforts. With extinction pressing down like gravity, humanity had become something unrecognizable, unified. Lia Chung sat in a biofeedback chamber at Unity Command, her body half-wrapped in neuroconductive mesh, tracing the lingering echo of the alien psychic pulse. The phenomenon was still not understood, part language, part emotion, part violation. It had struck not with violence, but comprehension, like a god whispering no into every neuron. Now she searched for fragments, anything left behind in the residue of thought. Her screen shimmered with neural models and resonance patterns, but none of them matched. Until one. The waveform, though faint, had structure, recursive loops, fractal architecture that suggested intentionality. It wasn't just communication. It was memory. And it was human. Lia stared at the sequence, her fingers frozen above the interface. The signal wasn't a pure alien construct. It had been filtered, mimicked, through a human mind. The realization shattered her focus. She ran tests, verified the anomaly again and again. Each time, the pattern held. Someone on Earth had already experienced this psychic contact before the first strike. Someone had been altered by it. She brought the data to Mbeki. The general didn't flinch. Could it be Khalid? No, Lia said quickly. His signal patterns are clean. This is older, deeper. I think it happened before the Titan attack. Before any of us realized they were watching. Becky paced. If someone has been compromised, we need to find them. I don't think they're compromised, Lia said, voice low. I think they're a bridge. Torres was pulled from orbit within the hour. He met Lia and Becky in Unity Command's secure briefing chamber. the air thick with electromagnetic dampeners and silence. "We have a sleeper?" Torres asked, scanning the digital trace Leah projected above the table. "Not a sleeper," she said. "A translator. But they don't know it." "How is that possible?" Leah hesitated. "If they were exposed to the alien signal during one of the early quantum experiments, say, the Neptune incident, then it's possible their brain adapted to interpret it unconsciously, like a neural antenna. They're not a spy. They're a key." Torres rubbed his temples. "And do we know who it is?" "We will," Becky said. "We've already narrowed the potential subjects. 43 personnel had access to the Neptune anomaly data. We're bringing them in." That list shrank fast. Within 2 days, Leah isolated a match. A physicist named Elias Merrick, once a prodigy at the Reykjavik Collider, later disgraced after a failed experiment vaporized a research module. Officially, he'd disappeared. Unofficially, he'd been living under an assumed identity in the Arctic Circle, working on solar resonance technology for a private energy firm. They found him on the edge of Greenland's ice shelf, sitting in a small outpost surrounded by solar dishes and frostbitten silence. He didn't resist. He barely reacted. "I've been waiting for you," he said simply, eyes sunken but alert. "They said you would come." Back at Unity Command, Elias was monitored, examined, questioned. Leah handled him gently. She spoke not as an interrogator, but as a colleague trying to understand. He responded in half-poetry, often distracted by things no one else could see. "I didn't hear them at first," he said one night, hands trembling over a mug of Sinti. "They came as images, shapes I couldn't hold. Then came the thoughts, like music, like a song older than gravity." Leah studied his brain scans. His temporal lobe showed unusual activity, patterns consistent with high-intensity quantum resonance. No human should have survived that. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" she asked. He looked at her as if she were a child. "I did, but I didn't have the words." Through Elias, they began to reconstruct parts of the alien syntax, not in symbols, but in tension. The enemy didn't think in linear thought. It thought in conditions, possibilities. Humanity was not judged by morality or science or courage. It was judged by coherence. Did it act as one? Did it know itself? Torres called it a consciousness litmus test. Becky called it a damn riddle. Leah, however, saw it as a mirror. "We spent all this time preparing for war," she said. "But the real test may not be how well we fight, but how well we unify thought." Elias confirmed it, or tried to. "They're waiting," he said, "for us to become something else, something they can recognize." "So how do we do that?" Becky asked. Leah paused, then turned to Torres. "We don't. Not alone. But maybe through Elias we can show them, not just what we are, what we're becoming." A new project was born, codename Beacon. The goal wasn't to destroy or defend, but to compose a message in alien resonance, broadcast directly through Elias's neural link. It would be Earth's ultimate gamble, a unified thought born not of fear or rage, but purpose. They had one chance. The silence would not last forever. The beacon prototype shimmered in the dark, like a question carved from glass. It wasn't a machine in the traditional sense. It was a convergence of human science and something far older, part transmitter, part interface, and part risk made manifest. Leah Ching stood before in Unity Command's deep core, her face lit by shifting pulses of energy echoing from the neural core embedded in its center. Elias Merrick sat inside the core itself, suspended in a lattice of soft light bands that responded not to movement, but to thought. They had calibrated the device over 6 intense days. Each waveform translated from Elias's mind had to pass through 3 layers of quantum filtration, ensuring no reflex, no stray human fear contaminated the signal. The message they were preparing wasn't verbal. It was conceptual, an emotional symphony of identity, humanity, rendered into a feeling. The team was skeletal. Only those who understood the stakes and the silence. General Mbeki monitored from the tactical chamber, her eyes sharp but tired. "Are we ready?" "No," the eye answered truthfully. "But waiting doesn't make us more ready." Torres had returned from orbit, grounding himself for the moment that might redefine the species. He approached Elias quietly, kneeling beside the interface pod. Do you understand what happens if this fails? Elias smiled faintly. I vanish. But maybe we all vanish if I don't. No pressure, Torres muttered and rose. The beacon pulsed once, soft blue, then fell still. Leah took her place at the console, her fingers hovering over the control surface. Elias, she said into the mic, begin when you're ready. No one is rushing you. But he had already begun. The light in the chamber shifted. It was subtle at first, like the tone of a room changing when a conversation turned serious. Elias's thoughts flowed outward, carried on low-frequency pulses, untranslatable by human ears, but visible to the dozens of instruments watching. A hum rose, deeper than hearing, felt in the chest. And then something impossible happened. The outermost sensors, those facing toward the Lagrange perimeter, registered an echo, not from a beacon, but from beyond it. A shape responded. Not physical, not locatable, but present, listening. Torres turned to Leah. They heard us. Leah stared at the data stream flooding her console. They're not just hearing, she whispered. They're joining. Through Elias, the beacon became a shared space. Not just a broadcast, but a communion. Human memory, culture, fear, hope, ambition, cruelty, forgiveness. It all poured out in conceptual form, unbound by language. The enemy responded not with words, but by shaping the resonance itself, like two minds adjusting to a rhythm neither fully understood. In the command chamber, silence fell across everyone. Then Elias began to speak, not to the team, but through the beacon. His voice was layered, not just his own. It bore echoes, overlaps, a harmonic density that didn't belong in a human throat. We see now, he said, that your kind seeks not conquest but coherence. Your unity is not perfect, but it is alive, and life is rare. Leah's hands trembled on the console. Are you one of them now? Elias's eyes opened, bright with something not entirely his. No, I am between. Torres leaned forward. Then tell us what you want. We do not want, Elias said. We witness. We test. We have observed countless minds rise and collapse beneath their own division. You have teetered on that edge. Yet you changed. Outside, across the planet, atmospheric monitors detected a sudden fluctuation in the ionosphere. All screens flickered. Communications stuttered. And then, in every major city, New York, Lagos, Tokyo, Bogota, Mumbai, a single image appeared simultaneously. It was not a threat. It was Earth as seen from the dark side of the moon. But layered over the image was something more, a luminous structure orbiting Earth, not visible by light or radar, only detectable through the beacon frequency. It had always been there, just out of phase, waiting. What is that? Becky demanded. Elias, now something else, answered. It is the archive, a vessel of memory, a construct of witness. It holds the history of all those who passed the trial. Most did not. Leah stepped closer to the pod. And now, Elias said, your world has entered into its span. Torres narrowed his eyes. So we passed? Not passed, Elias said, and the lights dimmed across the chamber. Changed. Across Earth, machines stopped momentarily, not broken, but paused. A heartbeat of silence rippled through every server, satellite, and synthetic core. And then, without command, they resumed, smarter, clearer. It wasn't just data that had been shared. It was understanding. The enemy, as humanity had labeled it, was no enemy at all. It was a mechanism, a filter, a test designed not to destroy, but to challenge, to provoke transformation. The pulse strikes, the illusions of war, the silence, all was pressure, applied not to break the species, but to refine it. Liao wept silently, not out of fear, but out of release. All her life she had studied patterns, looked for meaning in chaos. Now meaning had answered. Becky stood quietly, absorbing it all. So what happens now? Elias's voice softened, layered with human timbre once more. Now you are left to choose. The archive will not interfere. It records. It does not guide. But others will come. Others like us and others unlike. Will they test us too? Torres asked. Elias did not respond immediately. When he did, it was Elias speaking, not the voice of the many, just a man. No, they'll come because now you're visible. And with that, the beacon dimmed. Elias slumped gently in the harness, unconscious but breathing. The signal faded from the atmosphere. The sky remained unchanged. But every sensor on Earth now registered a new object in distant orbit. The archive. No longer cloaked. No longer observing in secret. Humanity had become part of something wider. The Genesis Protocol was updated that evening. Its new directive was not simply defense, but expansion into knowledge, into the archive, into the stars. Unity Command was renamed Horizon Council. TDS Unity began construction on a second vessel, designed not for battle, but diplomacy. And on every continent, the first generation of children born under the new flag would grow up knowing that the stars were not just far away, they were listening. And Earth had finally spoken.